All right. The next three classes, I figured that we'd take a look at a period of history that's in Scripture that maybe sometimes is overlooked as far as the background of the judges, as the slide says. I'm going to try to cram all of this stuff into three classes. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but I'll try my best. You know how we go down a lot of rabbit holes. But this is kind of the format. The world of the judges, unconquered land, Israel brought low, and then struggle for survival. So we're going to take a look today at. I'm going to kind of set the stage for everybody as far as the time period that the judges happened, right? And there's some considerable disagreement, I guess, in the historical and archaeological world on when this happened, but I'm going to try to set the stage into a time period that I believe that it makes sense when it happened because of the things that were going on in the ancient world at that time. So we'll take a look at some of the cultures that were going on here, why things happened when they did, and I think we can see God's hand in a lot of this as far as preparing the land of Canaan, number one, for the conquest, but also number two, as we look at Judges, a lot of the, particularly along the coastline, a lot of those communities are going to be wiped out for a lot of different reasons, and we'll get into that, which is going to allow the children of Israel to kind of come in and, settle into this area. So, with that in mind, don't want that. Okay, so just, as far as, map is concerned, this is, like the 1300s BC. Here are the main powers that we're going to be looking at during the time of Judges. The first thing I just want to kind of draw your attention to is the amount of land that Egypt controls here. Okay, so they're not only controlling, what is modern-day Egypt, and not only controlling the Nile River and all the way down into Nubia in the south, but look at this, they're controlling all of Canaan as well. Canaan, all the way up into modern-day Lebanon, which is where the Phoenicians were. So they had a considerable stranglehold on this area for a long period of time. And so the question is, what happened? Why did they lose control of the land of Canaan? Really, right before the time of the Judges. Interesting, right? And we'll look at that. Up top there in the blue is the Hittite Empire, another powerful empire. We'll look at some background with the Hittites. And then over here, I'm not going to look at all of them. You can take a look at that. But where Greece is, where modern-day Greece is, the Mycenaeans were very active during this time. They were the power in the Greek world. So, any questions on this? You see a lot of names that you might be familiar with. Babylon's up there, Nineveh, which was the capital of the Assyrian Empire. These are all people and empires that we should be familiar with because they're mentioned quite frequently in the Bible. And there's actually, some of these like Aswara and how come this is acting weird? My mouse is acting weird. All right, anyways. What I want to do with this map right here is just to kind of show everyone the extent of trade during this time. Trade during this time was really unbelievable. And if you can see all of these different trade routes here, both on land and sea, you had all of these different cultures interacting with each other, trading with each other. A lot of times they would intermarry as well, particularly among the nobility. So, for instance, to kind of cement peace treaties and stuff like that and trade treaties, maybe the Hittites would send down, the Hittite king would send down one of his daughters to be married to the son of Pharaoh. That type of thing, right? That has gone on and went on, particularly in Egypt, probably goes on now in some of these kind of smaller kingdoms that in the modern world. But definitely in the ancient world, this is something that happened quite frequently, and it kind of cemented these powers, these small groups of families, these nobilities in these different countries really controlled the whole deal, right? It wasn't like, the Hittites were a democracy or Egypt was a democracy. These were monarchies, and whatever the king or the pharaoh said, that's what happened. End of story. But just, kind of take a look. This is probably not the best, picture as far as, kind of seeing it up here. But, you have timber here. You have different pottery, silver, swords, daggers, and it's just being traded everywhere. And I'll give you an example just to kind of give you a flavor for things here. But you can see all of the trade routes that went on, particularly in the Mediterranean Sea. This was an era of trade. It was an era of wealth, of accomplishment. Things were going great at this time in the ancient world towards the end of the Bronze Age. People were getting very wealthy off of trade. The Mediterranean world at this time was very stable as well. You didn't have a lot of upheaval. You had a few skirmishes here, a few battles or whatever, but as far as trade is concerned and the economy, very stable. And that's going to be important as we go on and take a look at some things. All right, now, this is a picture at the bottom of the Mediterranean. It's in relatively shallow water. But if you take a look on the left-hand side, it's a shipwreck of a Bronze Age ship, of a cargo ship. And what they found in this ship is amazing. And it gives us really a peek into what they were trading, number one, but also the wealth that was involved here. They found this ship, I think, in like 82 or 83, and they really kind of went through everything. And they dated this shipwreck to, I think it's 1305 BC. So right around, the time period that we're going to be looking at. Okay, so what was in it? Well, a huge mix of different cargoes in here. We're talking about tons and tons of stuff that this one ship now, brothers and sisters, is traveling in the Mediterranean. They may have gone down into the Red Sea and kind of, down into Africa as well, but 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin. Now, what are those two metals when smelted together? What do they make? Bronze. Excellent, yes. So we call it the Bronze Age because bronze was the metal of choice. Everything in the Bronze Age of technological importance really was made from bronze, particularly weapons. The problem with bronze is that it dulls over time, and you're dealing with two different metals that you have to mine, not just one, as we're going to see. So you had to mine the tin. And tin was only found at this time now. It's going to be found in, the Phoenicians are going to trade with England, or what was known as Britain. But during this time, the only tin mines that you could find was in Afghanistan, modern-day Afghanistan. So think about that for a second. They're mining the tin, but then people have to go get that, and then they have to trade it with other things. It was a very expensive commodity at this time. So just keep that in mind. But they found, glass, ivory, 149 Canaanite jars full of all kinds of stuff. Foodstuffs, resin, glass beads, olives. This was interesting. They found logs, timber, from Africa. So just, they're traveling everywhere, picking up these things. Usually what happened was these ships would go out for like 2 or 3 years. If we remember, Solomon and Hiram, remember they had their own shipping, as Brother Mark pointed out, right? And they were, I think in Kings it kind of lists everything that they kind of traded and everything. Anyways, hippopotamus teeth, all right. Ivory, right? Ostrich eggshells, used to kind of make different decorations and stuff like that. Bronze and copper jewelry, gold and silver, tremendous amount. Weapons of all kinds. In food, there were all kinds of different foodstuffs, like different seeds. There was wheat, rye, almonds, raisins, pomegranates. So this was like a cargo ship. It really was like a modern-day cargo ship where it's just loaded with stuff. And it's a great time to be alive, I guess, for a human being in the late Bronze Age, or right up into the late Bronze Age. We're going to find out that it is going to change very quickly. And it is into this change and this chaos that, the judges are going to happen. And I just look at it as God's hand, actively being, looking out for his people and creating the circumstances for the children of Israel to come into the land and be successful. Okay. All right, here's just a couple pictures here of what they found. On the left-hand side, you can see all the different weapons up top, and you can see all of the different jars and whatnot here. And then over on the right-hand side, here's all the jewelry that they made. So expert craftsmen. We're not dealing with people that didn't know what they were doing, right? I think I've said this before. We can look back on ancient man and say, oh, he didn't know too much, but ancient man was modern man at one time, right? He was modern man. This was the height of technology, particularly with these weapons, with the bronze. But the bronze, brothers and sisters, just keep this in mind. The process took a long time. You can melt tin and bronze at a lower temperature, as opposed to iron, which has to be like 1,500 degrees. So there's a difference. But we're going to find that once they figured out how to get the furnaces up to 1,500 degrees, that iron is going to melt. And so they're going to figure out that you can melt iron and then add carbon to make steel. Absolutely. Very good. And so steel is really going to, it's going to be a technology that is going to be a complete disruption to the Mediterranean Bronze Age time. Okay? All right, any questions before we go on and look at some of these different countries that are going to be involved in the story of collapse? Dun, dun, dun. I'm giving you a little taste, guys, of what's going to happen. Okay? Let's take a look at the Hittites. If you look over on the right-hand picture here, you notice the size of these walls. And I have another picture of an artist's rendition of what the capital of the Hittites was called Hattusha, a massive city for this time. We're talking about, 1300s. And, this is the two lion gates right here. And you can just imagine kind of walking up to this and seeing the greatness of this city at this time. Hattusha was their capital. It's in modern-day Turkey. Turkey has some great sites as far as the ancient world is concerned. Some of the oldest cities in the world are found in Turkey. It's kind of like on my bucket list. Lee wants to go tremendously, right? I think she'd just tag along. But anyways, they were rivals with the Mycenaeans. If we remember from our, from high school or college, the story of Troy, the Iliad, right? Homer, told this orally, and this all took place during this time. The Mycenaeans, the Greeks, and the Hittites are battling for control of the trade routes up into the Black Sea. And so you have this area of the Dardanelles, the kind of very narrow area that goes up into there. Modern-day Istanbul is located in this area. Okay, so very important to trade. They were always at war and had little skirmishes with Egypt as well for control of Canaan. Hittites wanted it on Canaan as well, particularly along the coastline. There's a lot of good farmland along the coastline. The best farmland was near the coast where the flat land was. And that they wanted it. Just like, any empire in the world, what does an empire want? Well, it wants more. It wants more resources that they can pour into their own coffers, right? Same was true. So constant battles, right? Ramses II had a battle, was it Carchemish? Anyways, it's the first recorded battle between these two powers, the Hittites and the Egyptians. And they fought to a draw, okay? Chariots were very important, and we'll look at that as we go on too. The Hittites are going to be completely destroyed during the Bronze Age collapse. So just keep that in mind. We're going to look at that. It's called the Late Bronze Age Collapse. And it's going to fundamentally change the outcome of the Mediterranean. It's going to completely change it. It's going to completely change the political aspects of it, and it's going to open the door for, this group of people leaving Egypt and coming into this land. It's going to provide an opportunity for success. Anyways, Gonzo. Hittites don't exist anymore after this time. Their massive city of Hattusha laid waste. Okay, and so, why did this happen? Well, we're going to look at that. Very important. Here's an artist rendition of Hattusha. You can take a look at the walls here. They were massive walls, and you can see that it's just, there's inner walls and outer walls. You can see the fortress up there, the lower city, the upper city, that type of thing. So, a center of trade. The Hittites as well focused on horses. They were horse traders, and that was their big thing, because where Hattusha is located, it's flat land, open plains, and it was great for for raising horses. If we remember again from Troy, from the Iliad by Homer, what was the thing that the Greeks used to give to the Trojans to trick them? A giant what? A Trojan horse, right? And so that was really their gift. It was a fake gift, right? It was a gift like, great job, Trojans, you did great. Here's this horse. Horse was a symbol of power, and they also, they were horse traders as well. And, they were inside the belly of the horse, and the rest is history. Anyways, I don't know if you can see this or not, but look at the people, right? And so I think this is a nice scale of what the organization that it took to kind of run a city of this size. Brothers and sisters, Mediterranean people were doing great at this time. 1300s, that type of thing, 1200s. But we're gonna find out. I'm really setting this up. We're gonna find out that that's not gonna last. Okay, Mycenaeans, we talked about them already, but they were very warlike, warrior culture. On the right-hand side, we have the famous Mask of Agamemnon. Right, he was the leader of the Greeks that went and fought against Troy. They conquered a lot of different territory, particularly the Minoans on the island of Crete. They were great traders as well. They're going to be lost as well during this time. Gone. They just end. Their culture, civilization ends. That would be a death mask, Steve. Yes, absolutely. It's really not a death mask of Agamemnon, but it was found at Mycenae, and the people that found it said, "Oh, this is Agamemnon." It really isn't, but it was definitely a death mask, because there are giant beehive-like structures where they would bury their dead, filled with all kinds of treasures and stuff like that. Yes, had relatively good relations with Egypt. They are going to collapse completely during the Bronze Age collapse, okay? There's no record of them. Their city, Mycenae, is going to be destroyed. Their whole culture is going to be gone, all right? Here's a picture right here of Mycenae, and you can see that it's smaller than Hattusha, but it was like this military fortress. The best way to describe this would be, like a Middle Age, the Middle Ages castle, all right, a fortress, that type of thing. And it was a small, very powerful fortress city. And this is kind of, where, everything happened, right? Here's the palace complex up here. And this is, where all of the control of the government would take place. It's wiped out. It's gone, okay, during this time. Now, lastly, we'll take a look at Egypt. Egypt, out of all of these countries, is going to be the most stable. We all know about Egypt. Egypt and the history of the Hebrews are tied together like this, right? Think about all the times that Egypt is mentioned in Scripture. Coming out of Egypt, going down to Egypt, trusting in Egypt. It makes sense. That was always a temptation, brothers and sisters, of the Israelites, wasn't it? To trust in Egypt, to go down into Egypt. There was always this tension between staying in the land, but also looking to Egypt, right? What was the first thing, when the children of Israel were set free? Almost immediately they wanted to go back, didn't they? Because they missed all of the, the food and the vegetables, that type of thing. And now they're wandering in the wilderness. So, superpower of the day, they controlled all of the Nile River. I think we know a lot of this stuff, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But they conquered and controlled Canaan, very important to our story. They were perhaps the most stable civilization in the ancient world. For thousands and thousands of years, they just kind of continued on, right? And it was a very stable civilization. The Nile would flood, they would farm, it was great. And the great thing about Egypt, anyways, is that there are 2 deserts on each side. So it's very hard for, a land invasion to get through these deserts. And that's one of the reasons why that Egypt is not, it's going to be very hard to conquer Egypt, but it is going to be done. And then they're going to be really one of the only civilizations that is going to survive this collapse of civilization. But they're going to be severely weakened. And they're not going to be able to control the vast land that they had, particularly Canaan. Okay? I'm getting a little history, a little nerdy here with the history. I apologize. You got to set the stage. The great story. Questions, comments before we move on?
I had not really thought about Egypt.
We'll get the mic for you, Brother Steve.
Maybe not worth the effort to get the mic.
But, it is.
I had never really thought about Egypt having 2 deserts,
Yeah.
one on each side. I've often thought about the desert to the east of Egypt, but the other side too is an interesting thing to bring up. Thanks for that.
Yeah, for sure. The great Western Desert, the Egyptians would call it, right? And that prevented anyone from coming that way. So, okay. All right, now Canaan right here, as we know, was a land kind of between the great Hittite Empire and the Egyptian Empire. It was really, it was very important for trade. A lot of the trade routes would go through here, right? Here on the right-hand side, Canaanite tribes, and you can see all of the different tribes there. Philistia is there, Philistines, the Amalekites down south, the Amorites are in a lot of different areas, the Hittites, Jebusites, Perizzites. These are all, small nations that we should be familiar with. They're listed in Scripture quite a bit, particularly in Joshua and the Judges. And the warning was not to intermingle with them, not to take on their ways. What we're going to find, unfortunately, brothers and sisters, in Judges, once Joshua and the elders that outlived Joshua, they did not heed that warning. And in fact, once that kind of old guard dies out, you're going to have just, chaos. The majority of Israelites, as we're going to see, are going to be lost to history. They're going to intermarry with all of these tribes. They're going to culturally, religiously, linguistically take on the characteristics of the tribes. And I'm not, I can't really give you a number, but, I would say, between 60 and 70% of the children of Israel that came into the land with Joshua are going to be lost. So think about that as we read the Judges, right? Israel is not going to grow very powerful once they get into the land. In fact, the opposite is true. They're going to grow weaker and weaker and weaker because of this, because they didn't stay as a cohesive group. They didn't, care about their own culture. They didn't care about, continuing on with their religious practices that were given to their forefathers. And that's really what happens. They're lost to history. And so this whole area, out of all the areas, the Canaan is going to be hit the worst during this collapse. Okay? So I've set it up. The late Bronze Age collapse. What in the world was it? It doesn't sound great. It wasn't great. So let's take a look at it. All right. So the late Bronze Age collapse fundamentally is going to change human history. Okay? I'm trying to put this in modern terms, but just imagine if a people that no one knew about right now simultaneously invades Russia, China, and the United States. And not only invades, but completely wipes out these civilizations. Washington, D.C. is burned to the ground. New York burned to the ground. Moscow, gone. Beijing, Shanghai, gone, right? Just think about that. And I know we're dealing with 7 billion people, but this was how catastrophic this time was during the ancient world. One historian said the end of the Bronze Age was violent, sudden, and completely disruptive of the social order of the time. Out of all the times, of all the craziness that humans have been through, this was probably the worst time in civilization's history, as far as being on the precipice of complete and utter collapse. Civilization collapsed during this time, brothers and sisters. Gone. We already talked about this. Canaan was in chaos. Trade and communication between the major powers came to a standstill. There was no communication. Trade was limited. Major migration of people across the Mediterranean. You had hundreds of thousands of people, maybe not that much, but certainly tens of thousands of people moving from one area to another to kind of escape some of the stuff that was going on that we're going to look at. And it's going to take decades for civilization to kind of reorder itself, or to come back to what it was before this collapse. Okay, we are talking really about between a 50 and 100-year period. From let's just make this easy. I know I have from 1200 to 1150, but let's just say from 1200 to 1100 BC. This is the time period of the late Bronze Age collapse. And it coincides, brothers and sisters, with the Judges. It coincides with the conquering of Canaan. And now you have these Hebrews coming out of the wilderness to really take advantage of a lot of this stuff that is going on. I find it fascinating, all right. So here, if you look at all of the different fires, right, cities that were sacked, you can see along the coastline of modern-day Israel, these cities along the coastline are going to be completely wiped out by a group of people called the Sea Peoples. Dun, 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 the Sea Peoples. They should have like a cooler name or something like that. Think about the Sea Peoples as the Vikings of the ancient world, okay? And we'll look at that a little bit more. But you can see all of the different peoples, the Dorians, the Libyans, the Sea Peoples in the blue, okay? There's going to be a mass migration of people from one area to the next. And so the question is, well, why? Why did this happen? I thought everything was stable. I thought they were trading, they were friends, they had diplomatic relations. Yes, absolutely, that was all true. So why did this happen? It's one of the great mysteries of ancient history. So there are a few theories around this, okay? So I have a volcano over here, so that's kind of giving you, I'm setting it up again, everybody. All right. So the worst disaster in ancient history within a period of 40 to 50 years, almost every significant city in the Eastern Mediterranean is going to be destroyed. Gone. All of these cities are going to be wiped out. A lot of them are never going to be occupied again. A lot of like Hattusha, it's empty. It was empty during this time. No one's ever going to go back and kind of rebuild it. It's just going to be gone, okay? And this is going to happen throughout all of the Eastern Mediterranean because of these invasions and because of other things as well, okay? All right, so why did this happen? Well, there's a few different reasons and a few different theories when we look at the archaeological evidence of this time period. Number one, would be environmental stress. Things that human beings caused, but other things that they had no control of. The biggest one is volcano. There was a massive volcano eruption in Iceland during this time. It was so massive that for years it blocked out the sun from shining as bright as it could. Particularly in the northern areas of the Mediterranean, this is going to cause famine because the crops stop growing. The climate is going to change because of this volcano. And so there's going to be mass starvation during this time, particularly in the north, like I said, in the northern parts of the Mediterranean. So, if we were in that situation, brothers and sisters, we have a couple choices, don't we? We can kind of stay where we are and just hope everything changes, hope, this kind of black cloud and soot and everything that's been hanging around goes away. Or we can say, I've had it with this place. Nothing's going on. We're going to die here. And so what do? Well, you move. And so this is exactly what is going to happen. Because of this drought, because of famine, because of this volcano that happened, there's going to be this mass migration of people towards the east, away from the western part, which was hit the most by this volcano up in Iceland. They're going to move east by ship and by land. And as they go, there's going to be destruction as they go. There's going to be fighting for control of these new areas. Over farming, deforest, they cut down all the trees. They didn't understand that trees kind of, retain soil and, protects the crops from wind and stuff like that. I shouldn't say they didn't understand it. They did understand it, but they needed wood for all of this stuff, and they mismanaged a lot of these forests, and eventually, gone, use of iron weapons. We talked about this a little bit, but iron is going to fundamentally change. It's going to be a disruptive technology during this time. Once they have the technology, like I said, to melt iron and to make steel, there was abundance of iron everywhere. It was a lot more prevalent. And so they can find this, and they start making these weapons, these steel weapons, by the thousands. They're mass producing these weapons. They're mass producing spears as well. These are very simple weapons, okay? The nobility at this time relied heavily on the chariot. But now you have these iron weapons, and you have all of these people, and you can pass out spears and these simple swords to everybody, to the mob, really. It's kind of like, for an example, what the AK-47 was, okay? Think about iron weapons as the AK-47 of the modern world. Very simple to make. You can mass produce them, right? They're just stamped out, and the best thing is they work great. You can clog it up with mud, and it'll still fire. So it's fantastic. And so just think about these iron weapons as doing the same thing. The nobility, like Egypt and the Hittites, would go out there in their chariots thinking they're just going to kind of mow down these group of people. But they couldn't. There was too many of them, and they all had weapons as well. You can make a shield very easily. You have a shield and a spear. Done. You're all set. And you can send thousands and thousands of these people up against these chariots. And they wiped them out. They wiped out the chariots because of the iron. Political infighting, this always happens, right? You can't really pinpoint, like, what was the one thing that caused the collapse? It was really, several different things. It was really like a perfect storm during this time. And again, completely collapsed civilization. And then the mass migration of people, the sea peoples. These sea peoples are going to come in, particularly the cities along the coast, and they're going to be gonzo. And again, just take a look at, kind of the upheaval that is going to happen during this time, right? All of these different peoples are going to be moving east, and as they move east, they're looking for land. They're looking for resources because all of their land and their resources are gone because of the famine, because of the volcano. There's going to be earthquakes during this time as well. So just think about that. I mean, being, remember, they had a very, kind of limited understanding of nature. They attributed all of this stuff to their gods, right? The gods were angry. So you can think about, or maybe we can kind of imagine the mindset as well of these ancient people. Their whole livelihood is gone. The land that they relied on is not producing. So they say, the gods must be angry at us. We have to escape the wrath of the gods. And so it's just chaos during this time. Okay, so with that said, this is the backdrop of the Judges. This is the time period that we're talking about when we talk about the Judges. A time of upheaval, violence, and death. There was no real stability. And when we read Judges, brothers and sisters, do we get a sense of that? Do we get a sense that maybe this wasn't the most stable time in all of the ancient world, right? You have invasions, you have, this group of people coming in, that group of people coming in, right? It was not a time of stability. And now you have Israel right up into the land. As we're going to see, very early on, they did a great job of taking the land. But even during the time of Joshua, he had to ask the people, why are you slack to go up and take your inheritance? Right? They still, for whatever reason, they weren't aggressive enough or proactive enough to take their inheritance. And they left nearly every single one of these nations, alive in the land. They intermingled with them. And that's really the history of the Judges, right? This struggle to keep their own culture alive with all of this pressure from these different groups of people. If this collapse didn't happen at that time, and this is obviously where God's hand is, if this collapse didn't happen at this time, the environment wouldn't have been ripe for this movement into Egypt, out of Egypt into the land of promise. And so Egypt is not going to have that power and the control that it had over Canaan, and so it's wide open. You have this, these people coming in, wiping out really all of the population along the coast of modern-day Israel, of Canaan. You have Egypt losing control of this area. And then, here we go. Here's Israel ready to move right in. And there, obviously from the account in Joshua, there was still a lot of pushback. But, if we remember when Moses and the people, they were going to, right when they sent out the spies, remember they were going to go right in, right? And they sent out the spies, but because they brought back an evil report, we know that they had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. But there was a group of people that said, no, we're sorry, we want to go in right now. And they tried to go in, and what happened? They weren't successful. The Amalekites came down. The Amalekites were too strong at this time, right? And so I think that kind of gives us a little insight into the strength of the Canaanites is going to go down considerably during that 40 years when Israel is in the wilderness. It's almost like God is preparing the land for conquest. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's what Joshua told the people very clearly, and they were like, "Yeah, we're going to serve God too. We will absolutely conquer this land." I know there's a lot of cities and towns that need to be conquered. Don't worry, Joshua, we got it. And that wasn't the case, unfortunately. Okay, this will be our last slide. This is kind of just like a big picture overview, and we'll get into this a little bit more. But there is a cycle that we find in Judges, right? A cycle of misery, so to speak. There's disobedience, bondage, misery, liberation, rest, and then compromises. And this can be found in all of the chapters, 3 to 16. And then causes of failure, which we'll look at in a little more detail next week, Lord willing. Incomplete obedience. They didn't follow through on what they were supposed to do. And then idolatry, the intermarriage, losing their distinct culture that God wanted them to keep. They started worshiping all the other gods and intermarrying. That was the big thing, right? So, and that's where we'll stop, right? And we'll go through a little bit this in a little more detail.